Hello children, I hope all of you all are doing fine, and now we are moving on to chapter number 3 of our grammar textbook, that is active and passive voice. Now here we are beginning with the lesson active and passive voice. Now what do you understand by the terms active and passive? Now these are not new terms for you all have been listening and you all even know the meanings of this term. Active and passive voice. Now what are the meanings? Active means it denotes action. You are always on the go. You are doing something. Passive means what? Laziness. You are just not doing anything. You are just in that same form itself. Okay. Now for example, if I have given you a sentence here, he writes a letter. Okay. Here we have got the word somebody who is doing an action. What is the action he is doing? He is writing a letter. Now the same sentence can be written in another form also, but without changing the meaning of the word. Like for example, a letter is written by him. Okay. Now as I told you, a sentence can be written in two different ways without changing the meaning of the sentence. Okay. So now here he writes a letter is written by him. Has the meaning of the sentence changed? No. We know that a person is there. What is he doing? He is writing a letter. Now in the second sentence also we are conveying the same message, but we have written it another manner. Okay. So now for example, keeping the same example in your mind, if we look at the sentence, what are the main contents of the sentence? You have got a subject, you have got a verb, and you have got an object. Okay. So now here, who is the subject? He is the doer of the action. Okay. The subject, the person, he, what is he? He is doing the action. And writes is your verb. A letter is the object, and what happens? Letter is the receiver of the action. Okay. So now what action is a doer doing? What action is he doing? He is writing a letter. So here what is given? The stress is given on the person who is doing the action. Okay. The stress is given on the subject or on the person, that is he. So when the subject of the verb is the doer of the action, it is said to be in the active form. Okay, so now you have taken a sentence into consideration. He writes a letter. We have even identified the different parts of the sentence. He is a subject, writes is a verb, and letter is a object. Now here, when the person who is doing the action is given more stress, that time it is said to be the subject of the verb is the doer of the action. Now here he is the doer of the action. So that time this particular sentence is said to be in the active form. Is that clear, children? What do you mean by sentence in the active form? When the stress is given on the subject who is the doer of the action, that time it is said to be in the active form. Now take the same sentence which we have written in another form. A letter is written by him. Okay, so now here a letter is written by him. So now here the letter becomes a subject. Written, your verb has undergone a little change here. You have got the helping verb plus you have got the verb here has changed. It has become into the past participle form of the verb, and by him has become the object. Okay. So now here the work, that is the work done, that is the letter, has gained more importance than the doer. A letter is written by him. So now here the stress is coming here on the letter, not on the person who has done the action. So the doer of the action has become less important. Is that clear? So now the stress is coming here on the letter, on the action, that was on the receiver. So here the action, the person who has done the action has become less important. So the passive voice is generally used when we do not know who has done the action, or the action is more important than the doer of the action. So, is that clear? So, passive sentence is nothing but when the work that was done is becoming more important than the doer of the action. So, that is how you go or understand the term passive voice. Okay, so now there are certain things that you have to remember when you convert an active sentence into a passive sentence. Okay, now for example, while changing a sentence from active to passive, remember the position of the subject and the object are interchanged. Okay, that is step 1. The auxiliary or the helping verbs with past participle has been used. Okay, there are changes in your verb. So, what it is, the verb that undergoes the change is becoming, you are using the past participle of the verb. Okay. Then your step 3 is a preposition by has been used. So, these are the basic 3 steps that are usually needed when you have to change a sentence from the active to the passive. Okay. Now, for example, see, I have given you here, he writes a letter. I have used different colors, so now you all can keep in mind what are the changes that I have. So, now he writes a letter. Now, in this what you have to do is we have to identify what is the subject, what is the object and what is the verb. So, here he is the subject, he is the doer of the action. Writes is the action, that is the verb. And what is he doing? What is the object here? The letter. That is the receiver of the action. We are writing a letter. So, the letter is getting the action. Okay. So, now here what is step number 1? Step number 1 is the position of the subject and the object gets interchanged. Okay. So, now here the subject becomes the object and the object here becomes the subject when you rewrite it in the passive form. So, a letter. Now, as I told you, even the verbs also undergo changes. Now, step number 1 is what? Here the subject he becomes the object. A letter, which was the object in the given sentence, becomes the subject. So, here that is step number 1. Then step number 2 is the verb. The verb in the original sentence, your verb is he writes. Okay, writes. The verb is in the present tense. Writes. He writes a letter. Now, step number 2, what you have to do is the verb writes changes into the past participle form of the given verb. So, now writes, when you change it into the past participle, it becomes written. As I told you in the tenses lesson also, the words when they change into the past participle usually end in en, ed, t or d mostly. So, that is now step number 2. Now, step number 3 is the preposition, the use of the preposition by. A new word is also used and that is a preposition. So, that is how you change a sentence from the active to passive. You have got a letter is written by him. So, here helping verb with the past participle of the verb and the preposition by is also introduced, and that is how you get a sentence rewritten into the passive form. So, now as your first practice exercise, you have to open to page 94 in your textbook and you do exercise A, that is mainly fill in the blanks that can be done in your textbook. Then exercise B and C has to be done in your notebook. Now, because this is a new lesson, I want you all to take a new page, write the name of the lesson, active and passive voice, and then you can start doing the exercise in your notebook. After you do the exercise in your notebook, we will see how we can change the verb forms in different kinds of tenses. Okay. Now, in different kinds of tenses, how will you change the verbs. If it is given in the active form, how are you going to change it into the simple present tense? If your given sentence is in a simple present tense, how will you convert that sentence into the passive form? Now, simple present tense, the usual given format is am, are plus the past participle. Now, whenever a sentence is given in the active form, the verb will usually be in the past participle form of the verb. Okay. Now, for example, I am giving you a sentence here using the verb eat. Okay. So, the sentence, if it is given in the active form, is Ridhima eats biscuits every morning. Okay. Now, this is your given sentence. Now, the very first step when you get a sentence like this is first you have to identify the subject, the verb and the object. Okay, so here Ridhima we know is our subject, biscuits is our object. The verb here is eats. Now, eats here is in the present tense, isn't it? So, when you convert this, how will you convert it? It becomes the past participle of the verb. So, now your biscuits, as I said, see how you will convert it, it will become either you will be using is, am, are plus the past participle of the verb. So, biscuits are eaten by Ridhima every morning. So, that is how will you go about doing the steps. First, you will interchange the subject and the places of the subject and the objects are interchanged. Then you look at the verb that is eats becomes it takes the past participle form of the verb eaten, and then in step 3 is what you are introducing the preposition by. So, biscuits are eaten by Ridhima. So, if you follow these 3 steps, you get your answer to the sentence in the passive form. So, this is how you convert a sentence from the simple present tense into the passive form. Now, if you are given the sentence in the simple past tense, okay, if your sentence is in the simple past tense, when you convert it into the passive form, past means already happened, was or were. So, you will use was or were plus whatever verb is given, the past participle form of that verb. Now, for example, if your verb that is given there is given as introduced, because we are in the past tense, introduced, ed is already there. So, if your given sentence is the principal introduced the chief guest to the audience. Okay. First step, what you have to do? You have to identify the subject, verb and object. So, here the principal becomes a subject, the chief guest is your object. Now, what is your verb? Your verb is introduce. So, step number 1, you have to interchange the places of the subject and the object. So, now you will start the chief guest, okay. Then the principal goes towards the last. So, step number 2, what is step number 2? The verb undergoes the changes. So, now here introduced is the verb that is in the past tense. So, here when you have to convert it into passive voice, you will use helping verb was and plus the past participle of that verb. So, the past participle of that verb will be was introduced, and then the third step is you will introduce the preposition by. So, the chief guest was introduced by the principal to the audience. So, that is how you are going to do the conversion of a given sentence when it is in the simple past tense. How will you rewrite it into its passive form? Okay, so now after you finish with this, you have to open your textbooks to page 95 and do exercise D, E, F and G in the textbook itself. These are basically, only fill in the blanks. So, you can, as you finish listening to this module, immediately you can do that exercise in your textbook. Then, after that, we finish with the simple present, we finish with the simple past. Now, how will you given a sentence in the simple future, how are you going to write it in its passive form? So the form that will be is, future, will or shall. Now shall, as I have told you in the tenses lesson, shall is very rarely used in modern English. So it's basically will, that is it. So it will be either will plus be plus the past participle of the verb. Okay. So it will be plus the past participle of the verb. Now if your given verb is write. So the verb, if it is given in the past form, should be, not right. Okay, no problem. That's a general verb given, the first form of the verb given. Now, if your sentence in the active form is, I will write a letter, future, okay, I will write a letter. How will you change it into your passive form? Using the 3 steps of the interchange of the object and the subject. Second step is, the verb takes the past participle form. Then the third step is you are introducing by. So here you will write, I will write a letter. So when you have to rewrite it in the basic passive form, you will say a letter. See the form, what will be, and the past participle of it, will be written by me. So this is how you will change a given sentence from the simple future active into simple future passive form. Okay, a letter, as I have given you the form in the passive will plus be plus the past participle. PV is nothing but the past participle of the verb. So here you have got, I will write a letter will be written by me. As I said here, using the steps 1, 2, 3, I am not going to again and again show you how to go about step 1, step 2, step 3. Using all those 3, interchange of the subject and object. Second one is a verb undergoes a change where you will be writing will plus be plus past participle of the verb, and the third one is introducing of the preposition by. So this is how you will be changing a given sentence into the passive form. Okay, so with this we will end our first module here.